They don't mock your failures. They mock your silence, your absence, your decision to walk through life like a ghost hoping someone notices you without ever standing up, speaking out, or fighting back. They don't laugh because you're weak. They laugh because you pretend strength while hiding in fear. And the truth is brutal. No one takes you seriously because you don't take yourself seriously. You abandoned your roar long before they ever silenced you. You handed over your dignity when you decided that comfort was safer than growth, that invisibility was better than rejection, and that pretending to be okay would somehow lead to change. But here's what they won't tell you. Every day you remain quiet, they grow louder. Every time you avoid confrontation, you feed their perception of you as insignificant. And every time you choose numbness over awakening, the world keeps placing you in the background like a shadow that never mattered. You were not created to be background noise. You weren't born to be someone's afterthought. But let's face it, no one respects the man who drifts. No one fears the one who blends. The man who is never seen, never remembered, never noticed, is the one who chose that role because it was easier than bleeding for his name. And you, yes you, might be one of them. The crowd sees it. They see the way you flinch at pressure. They see the way you smile to hide discomfort. They see the way your eyes lower when someone challenges you. They see it all. And when people see weakness you try to hide, they don't offer help. They laugh. The question isn't whether the world is cruel. The question is why you've made peace with being its joke. Every man must decide what pain he'll live with, the pain of becoming or the pain of staying invisible. One hurts like fire. The other rots like cancer. The first wakes up your soul. The second kills it silently. And that's the pain you're carrying right now. The quiet one. The pain of not being taken seriously. The shame of being the one who is always overlooked. And yet, strangely, you keep choosing it every morning when you look in the mirror and pretend it's not there. Even Jesus, the Son of God, was mocked, spit on, stripped of dignity by people who thought he was just another delusional man. But he didn't retreat into silence. He didn't cower. He didn't become invisible. He knew who he was. And that made people uncomfortable. If the Son of God was willing to be seen, rejected, hated, and hung, what gives you the illusion that your safe little corner of irrelevance is noble? You are not being humble by hiding. You are being defeated. And make no mistake, they will keep mocking you. They will keep laughing. Because the man who chooses silence, who avoids pain, who flees the fire, becomes the entertainment of those who dominate it. You are not mocked because of who you are. You are mocked because of what you allow. And until you decide to resurrect your identity, to remember who you were before fear trained you to shrink, you will remain the easiest target in the room. But when you choose to rise, to speak, to move with weight, the mockery turns to silence, not because they changed, but because you did. They don't need to hurt you, but because you do it for them. Every time you smile when you're broken, nod when you should scream, stay silent when your soul is on fire, you become exactly what they want: predictable, soft, harmless. And in a world that feeds on appearances, the man who pretends becomes the perfect prey. You put on the mask to protect yourself, but it's the mask that's destroying you. You tell yourself you're strong because you endure quietly, but deep down you know you're not enduring, you're escaping. And that escape has a cost: your respect, your presence, your voice. The truth is, pretending to be okay is a trap. It's not bravery. It's not emotional maturity. It's fear dressed in calm. And people sense it. They feel when you're lying to yourself. And when they know you're fake, they treat you like fiction, disposable, laughable, invisible. You're trying to survive in a world that only respects those who bleed their truth, the ones who cry out, the ones who roar when pushed, the ones who confront reality even if it breaks them. But you've chosen the path of peace over power, and now they don't see you as peaceful. They see you as passive, not calm, weak, not composed, disconnected. And every time you say "I'm fine" when you're dying inside, you surrender more of your strength to the lie that maybe it'll pass. But it won't. Nothing passes that you don't face. And the longer you fake peace, the deeper you sink into the role of a man no one listens to, no one fears, no one follows. You became the easy target the moment you stopped defending yourself. Not with fists, but with truth. You stopped honoring your emotions. You stopped declaring what you believe. You let the world mold you because the mirror scared you. And now, when you speak, no one hears. Because they've learned, you never say what you really mean. You never act from the soul, only from fear. Even Jesus in his darkest hour didn't pretend. He wept. He sweat blood. He cried out to the Father. He didn't walk in false strength. He walked in vulnerable truth. And that's what made him unstoppable. The real ones don't fake. The kings don't smile through humiliation. They confront it, not to prove anything, but to protect what they were born to carry. Stop pretending. The ones who mock you aren't evil. They're just reacting to the version of you that has no spine. The version that only exists because you buried the real one years ago. Want to be respected? Resurrect. The world doesn't care about your heart. It respects your results. It doesn't reward potential. It glorifies proof. In silence, society studies you. And when it sees no weight, no value, no fire behind your existence, it discards you. Not with violence, but with laughter. That quiet, cold laughter. The kind that echoes in looks, in missed opportunities, in conversations you're not part of. You're not hated. You're ignored. And that's worse, because you weren't meant to be invisible. You just became irrelevant by staying unsharpened. Society is brutal because it's honest. It reflects what you've become. Passive, safe, controlled. It doesn't look at your dreams. It looks at your discipline. And when it sees none, it labels you weak. And when you're labeled weak, you become the easy object of ridicule. A man without edge, without urgency, without any fight left in his chest. And let me tell you, the world doesn't kneel for those men. It consumes them. Slowly, publicly, mercilessly. You keep asking why they mock you. But maybe the better question is, what have you built that demands their respect? What have you cultivated that sets you apart? You want to be honored like a lion while living like a sheep. You want to be followed while hiding behind indecisiveness. You want the crown but reject the war. That's not how this works. This world bows to usefulness, to power, to those who sharpened their minds in silence and returned with wisdom that could split lies in half. Even Jesus, full of mercy, full of grace, was not passive. He knew his purpose. He walked with such clarity that even demons trembled. Not because he shouted, but because his presence was weight. His usefulness wasn't in performance, but in precision. Every word, every step, every act carried purpose. You scatter yourself, distracted, passive, spiritually diluted. And that's why they laugh. The world doesn't need you to be loud. It needs you to be unignorable. And right now, you are completely ignorable. Why? Because the man who doesn't build becomes a symbol of failure to those who do. Not because they hate you, but because your existence confirms what they fear becoming. And they mock what they fear. Become useful, not just for status, but to redeem your soul from passivity. Purpose silences critics. Discipline forces respect. A man on fire becomes a threat, even when he's quiet. Until then, they'll keep laughing. Not because they're cruel, but because they don't see a reason to stop. There's something you need to understand. Your silence is not noble. Your peacekeeping is not wisdom. Your avoidance is not strength. It's fear, wearing a mask of self-control. And they know it. They see it. Every time you walk away from tension, every time you nod instead of challenge, every time you let the moment pass, they don't admire your maturity. They label you weak, predictable, powerless. You think you're avoiding drama, but in reality, you're avoiding yourself. Because deep down you know, you're not silent because you're at peace. You're silent because you're afraid of what will happen if you speak. If you shake the table, if you stand up and finally say what's been boiling inside your chest for years. And that fear is visible. That hesitation is loud, and they laugh. Not always out loud, but in how they treat you. They interrupt you, they forget your name, they exclude you from decisions. They pat you on the back like a child. That's how they laugh. That's how the world punishes men who avoid their edge. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The man who doesn't confront becomes a puppet of everyone else's will. Because confrontation isn't about violence, it's about clarity. It's about not letting lies grow roots. It's about protecting the fire God placed inside you. And when you refuse to confront what's wrong, in others, in life, and, most importantly in yourself, you allow weakness to lead your life. Even Jesus confronted, with grace, but with force. He flipped tables. He called out hypocrisy. He didn't retreat from conflict when truth was at stake. And every time he stood, the crowd split. Some followed, others hated, but none ignored, because confrontation creates gravity, and gravity demands respect. But you walk light, not because you're free, but because you've emptied yourself to please, to avoid conflict, to be liked. And now, you're nothing but a background figure in your own life, while they laugh, while they dominate, while they shape the narrative, because you refuse to write your own. Confront, not to prove you're right, but to stop being the joke. Not to hurt others, but to stop letting them define you. Stand up, speak, shake the silence, because until you do, they'll keep laughing, and you'll keep sinking. You think you're keeping the peace. You think your silence is a form of strength. You've convinced yourself that avoiding confrontation is maturity. But deep inside, you know, it's not peace you're maintaining, it's power you're avoiding. And the price? Your own soul, your own weight, your own voice. Because in a world like this, a man who avoids confrontation becomes invisible, becomes a joke, becomes that person everyone talks about when he leaves the room. But never with respect, only with smirks, only with mockery, only with the kind of laughter that tastes like pity. Every time you nod when you should object, every time you swallow your truth to avoid tension, every time you leave the room when your name is called, you're not preserving dignity, you're trading it, piece by piece, and they see it. They test you. And every time you back down, every time you flinch, every time you stay quiet when fire rises, they classify you deeper and deeper into the category of not a threat. And in this world, the man who is not a threat is a toy. He becomes entertainment, a filler, a disposable presence. Here's what no one will tell you. Confrontation isn't chaos. It's clarity. The people who shape the world are not the ones who shout the loudest, but the ones who refuse to lie to themselves, the ones who call things by their true name, the ones who stop pretending. And that's your problem. You've been pretending for too long. Pretending you're at peace. Pretending you're above conflict. Pretending it doesn't bother you when you're disrespected. But it does. You feel it, in the pit of your stomach. That ache, that quiet burn, that rage with nowhere to go. That's your soul reminding you you were not built to be stepped on. You see, the reason they laugh is because you gave them permission. Not directly, but through your passivity, through your fear, through your refusal to draw lines. People don't respect what you tolerate, they exploit it. The man who never confronts becomes the perfect mirror for their superiority. You show them how powerful they are by how powerless you act. That's why they treat you like background noise. That's why your ideas get stolen. That's why your presence feels optional. Because you've trained them to see you that way. Even Jesus, the embodiment of truth and grace, never avoided confrontation. He confronted spiritual leaders. He confronted systems. He confronted demons. And most powerfully, he confronted his own disciples when their thinking was broken, not to create division, but to expose lies, to awaken truth, to call out darkness pretending to be light. He didn't avoid tension, he carried it like a sword, because truth without confrontation is fiction, and love without confrontation is cowardice. But you've made a habit of retreating. You leave rooms when things get tense. You stay silent to avoid offending. You let people misrepresent you, misuse you, manipulate you, and you call it not wanting to cause problems. But brother, You are the problem now. Because your absence is louder than any scream. Your silence is what fuels their dominance. Your lack of confrontation is what gives them permission to keep laughing. Let me tell you the truth. No one is coming to save your dignity. No one is going to speak for you. No one will rise in your place. If you don't rise, you disappear. If you don't speak, they define your story. And if you don't confront, you become their entertainment. It starts with a smirk, then a joke, then your name being a punchline, and finally, you no longer exist to them. So you have a choice. Keep avoiding and stay in the background forever. Forgotten, used, invisible. Or confront, not with hate, but with weight, with truth, with clarity. Say what needs to be said. Set the boundary. Push back when it matters. Draw the sword of presence and let them know. This version of me doesn't play small anymore. Because, while they keep laughing now, the moment you choose to confront, everything changes. The laughter dies, the room shifts, the ones who mocked you start watching you, and the ones who underestimated you begin to fear your silence. Not because you're loud, but because now your silence carries weight. You say it's faith. You say it's optimism. You say you're keeping your mindset clean. But the truth? You're lying to yourself. Every time you post empty affirmations, repeat mantras you don't live, smile through chaos and call it mental strength, you are not getting stronger. You're self-destructing with sugar-coated deception. You've become fluent in spiritual cliches, motivational quotes, and feel-good illusions. But you haven't moved 1 inch in the direction of change. You are the prisoner who painted murals over the cracks in the wall and convinced himself it's freedom. This isn't positivity. It's paralysis in disguise. And the most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves to avoid pain. Everything's fine. I'm working on it. God's timing. It is what it is. No. Sometimes it's not fine. Sometimes you're not working. You're stalling. Sometimes it's not God's timing. It's your laziness. And what it is your fear wearing spiritual perfume. You are not protecting your peace. You are hiding inside denial and calling it wisdom. People don't take you seriously because you don't take reality seriously. And you've wrapped yourself in this bubble of faux inspiration that keeps you just comfortable enough to stay stuck. You think positivity will lead to transformation. But positivity without confrontation is anesthesia. It numbs your pain so you don't deal with it. It gives you the illusion of progress while you remain exactly where you are. You repeat, "I'm enough," because you're afraid you're not. You tell yourself, "I'm not in competition with anyone," because you've already lost in silence. You chant, "Let it go," because deep down, it's eating you alive. That's not healing. That's spiritual bypassing. You're skipping the necessary death that precedes resurrection. And without that death, of ego, of illusion, of false peace, you will never rise. Jesus never used false hope to escape reality. He never covered pain with platitudes. He cried. He bled. He spoke hard truths. He looked death in the face. He didn't sugarcoat suffering. He used it. He didn't avoid pain. He passed through it. And that's why his words have weight. That's why his presence crushed atmospheres. Because he didn't lie to himself. And you? You can't even look in the mirror without quoting someone else's voice. You think you're inspiring. But no one believes it. Not even you. Your positivity is empty because it isn't anchored in truth. It's floating, drifting, detached from discipline. And discipline is the bridge between hope and reality. Until you get real, no change will ever last. Until you feel the burn of honesty, you'll never have the fire to rebuild. So stop. Stop hiding your wounds behind mantras. Stop calling weakness peace. Stop masking avoidance with faith. You are not in a season of preparation. You're in a cycle of deception. And until you confront that, the laughter behind your back won't stop. Because the world can smell fake. They see your performance. They hear the cracks in your voice when you say, "I'm fine." And they laugh. Not because they hate you, but because they've seen this movie before. And you're playing a role they've already stopped believing in. Positivity isn't power unless it's forged in truth. Hope isn't healing unless it faces the wound. Real change isn't beautiful, it's brutal, it's bloody, it hurts before it frees. But that's the cost. You don't get to transform without dying to your illusions. You don't get to rise unless you bury the masks. So do it. Kill the lies, face the fire, speak the truth to yourself. It will hurt, but it will make you real. And when you're real, you stop being a target. You stop being a joke. You start walking with something they can't ignore, because a man who faces the truth can't be laughed at. He can only be followed. He didn't fit their expectations. He wasn't loud enough for the rebels, nor submissive enough for the religious. He wasn't diplomatic, nor did he seek approval. He came with fire in his voice, silence in his answers, and weight in his presence. And for that, they laughed. They mocked him. They said, "Isn't this the carpenter's son?" They stripped him, beat him, crowned him with thorns, and said, "Prophesy then. Who hit you?" Not because he was weak, but because cowards always mock what they don't understand. Because when a man walks in truth, those who hide in comfort call him crazy, delusional, or dangerous. You're being laughed at not because you're like Christ, but because you're nothing like him. He was mocked for his strength. You're mocked for your silence. He was ridiculed for confronting power. You're laughed at for avoiding it. He entered the synagogue and overturned tables. You enter rooms and shrink. He stood before rulers and spoke of kingdoms. You stand before fear and ask for peace. And still, you wear a cross around your neck, as if you're following him. When in truth, you avoid everything he walked through. Do you think Jesus was gentle because he was afraid? No. His gentleness came from control, not weakness. His silence was a weapon. His stillness was force. But you're silent because you have no fight. You're still because fear locked your soul in paralysis, and the people around you sense it. That's why they don't take you seriously. That's why your opinions land like feathers, because there's no weight behind your words, no revelation, no edge, just borrowed phrases and tired smiles. You keep quoting Jesus, but do you embody him? Do you carry presence that shakes a room? Or are you the kind of man who stays silent when injustice speaks, who avoids correction because it's too uncomfortable, who smiles in moments where truth should be spoken with fire? The cowards that mocked Jesus still exist today. They mock those who are real, those who walk with direction, those who don't chase applause. But they also mock the passive, not with words, but with silence. They ignore you because you've made yourself ignorable. You think you're being noble by avoiding conflict, by staying humble, by letting things slide. But your inaction isn't humility, it's absence. Jesus never tolerated that in his disciples. When Peter tried to redirect the mission, Jesus said, "Get behind me, Satan." When the Pharisees twisted the truth, he called them whitewashed tombs. He didn't clap back for pride. He spoke to restore weight to what was sacred. And that's what you're missing. Weight. Your life lacks confrontation with yourself. You avoid what Jesus embraced, the agony of truth. You were never supposed to be liked. You were meant to be feared in the spirit, honored by your integrity, remembered by your presence. But instead, you've become background noise in a generation of cowards applauding each other's mediocrity. And the worst part? You think you're being like Christ. But Jesus never backed down to keep peace. He was peace and still caused war. Until you walk in that same intensity, don't expect to be respected. Until your silence carries truth instead of fear, don't wonder why they laugh. Until your presence challenges the room, you'll be dismissed like static. The ones who mocked him had titles, robes, platforms, but none of them had what he carried, and neither do they now. But you could. If you'd stop performing and start confronting, if you'd stop copying and start carrying, stop quoting Jesus, start becoming him, and watch what happens to their laughter. It dies. Not because they changed, but because you finally did. You've spent your whole life trying to be enough in the eyes of others. You shape your words to fit the room. You shrink your truth to avoid offense. You change your tone, your pace, your energy, depending on who's watching. And every time you do, a piece of your soul dissolves. Because deep down, you know, you're not being you. You're being what you think they'll accept, what they'll applaud, what they won't reject. And that's exactly why they laugh. They don't mock you for who you are. They mock you for who you're pretending to be. Because nothing is more laughable than a man without a spine, a voice, or a center. They can feel that you don't really know yourself, that you bend to whatever pressure is closest, that your values shift with the wind. And that kind of man, he's not seen as a threat. He's seen as a tool, a placeholder, a filler, the kind of man you talk over, the kind of man you forget. You can read all the books, quote all the philosophers, even post Bible verses. But if you don't know who you are, what you stand for, what you'll never tolerate, what you were born to carry, you'll forever live under the control of louder voices, of more aggressive energies, of manipulative people who smell uncertainty like blood. And in their world, you're just prey. You keep asking why people walk over you, why no one listens, why your ideas get ignored. But the truth is, when a man speaks without identity, his words vanish in the wind. No weight, no echo, just noise. You've become noise. Because you've never taken the time to sit in the silence and confront the truth. You don't know yourself. And if you don't know yourself, you'll believe what they say about you. If they call you weak, you agree. If they call you lazy, you collapse. If they say, you'll never make it, you believe them more than you believe your own spirit. That's the cost of identity neglect. You're a mirror for other people's projections. And eventually, you lose the ability to distinguish your voice from theirs. Even Jesus, when accused, stood silent. Not because he was unsure, but because he was unshakable. He didn't argue because he already knew. He didn't seek validation because he walked with the Father's affirmation. He didn't ask for opinions because he was aligned with eternal design. And that's what made him untouchable, even when they struck him. You get struck by whispers, broken by glances, destroyed by likes that never came. Because you've never built the inner fortress of self-awareness, of spiritual clarity, of identity rooted in fire. You can't keep going like this, living to not offend, breathing to be liked, moving to be accepted. Because the man who lives for approval will always be enslaved to perception. They laugh at you not because you're beneath them, but because you're beneath yourself. Because they sense the greatness you've buried under performance, and nothing's more ridiculous than a king pretending to be a servant, just to be invited to the table. So stop asking what they think. Stop measuring your worth by applause. Stop chasing comfort. Instead, confront. Confront who you are, who you're not, what you've become, and what you were meant to be. Because once you know who you are, truly, deeply, undeniably, the room shifts, the laughter stops, the manipulations fail. The world either respects you or avoids you. But it never mocks you again. You've been running for years, from pressure, from silence, from the version of you that refuses to play small. You call it survival, but it's not. It's spiritual evasion, a quiet rebellion against your own calling. And hell loves that. Hell thrives on men who run, because a man who runs from himself is no threat to darkness. A man who avoids truth is just another echo, another body, another puppet, loud on the outside, hollow within. Every day you avoid the mirror, every conversation you dodge, every decision you postpone, you think you're delaying failure, but you're not. You're feeding it. You're nurturing your destruction by stretching the timeline of your breakthrough. And what you don't see is that the people laughing at you, the ones who mock your voice, your ideas, your presence, they don't need to stop you. You're doing the job for them. Because when a man runs, he loses gravity. He loses weight. He becomes forgettable, ignorable, dismissible. And you've become a shadow of what you were meant to be. Because somewhere along the road, you believed a lie that avoiding the fire would keep you whole. But it didn't. It broke you slowly, quietly, and now you smile while bleeding, walk while empty, speak while fading. The truth is, the day you stop running, everything changes. not just for you, but for the very atmosphere around you. Because you weren't designed to flee. You were forged for war. Your spirit was built to confront, to invade, to break patterns and burn excuses. And when a man like that stops running and stands still, hell starts to tremble. Because now, you're dangerous. Not because you fight with rage, but because you finally see. And when you see, you speak with authority. You move with direction. You command with silence. Even Jesus had moments where the enemy offered him a way out. In the wilderness, Satan said, "Take the shortcut." In the garden, his soul cried, out in agony. On the cross, they taunted, "Come down and save yourself." All opportunities to run, all doors to escape. But he stayed, he stood, he endured. Not because it was easy, but because he knew. Power only transfers to those who stay in the fire. You've run long enough. You've given fear enough miles. You've let shame, rejection, and distraction define your journey. But inside you, there's still something alive. A flicker. A sound. A cry. The part of you that remembers who you were before fear named you. Before humiliation shaped you. Before mockery muted you. You were born with fire in your lungs, with a spine made of steel, with a name etched in eternity, but you traded it for temporary relief, for their approval, for their applause, and now they laugh, not because they're evil, but because you're no longer a problem. You're a man who won't rise, a soul that won't roar. But the moment you turn around, not with emotion but with decision, hell remembers your name, and heaven leans in. Because now you're aligned, now you're awakened, now your eyes don't flinch, your steps don't hesitate, your presence doesn't apologize. And that kind of man, he can't be laughed at, he can't be ignored. He shifts nations just by being, so stop running. Not tomorrow, not next season, now. Stand up, not with noise, but with certainty. Reclaim the ground you gave away in silence. And when you do, you won't need to announce your return. The spiritual realm will know, the air will change, the voices will quiet, and the mockers will feel it. Because the man who stops running becomes the man no one saw coming.